You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right, and welcome to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. I am your host, Mike Riley, and I am, of course, joined by my lovely co-host, Cameron Robson, and my girl, Charlie Sandy. And, of course, we have our executive producer in the building, Brooke Doherty. And we are joined also, too, by a special guest tonight, Mr. Alan Swayze. He is in the house tonight, so we have a little bit of an audience. Everybody give a round of applause and say hello.
Yo.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, I'm working on the sound effects thing. All right, it is Thursday, November 17th, 2016. We are a week away from Thanksgiving, which means that next week we will be taking a break so we can all be with our families and eat turkey and whatnot and be thankful for all the things we're thankful for. And we'll get into that a little later. We'll talk about all the cool things we're thankful for. You know, last year I was on Let's Make a Deal for Thanksgiving with, what's that guy? What was his name? Wayne Brady.
Really?
Yeah. You can,
so
if
cool,
you Google
man.
search it, yeah, you can find
I know Brady.
Yeah, I was acting a fool. Anyway, all right, y'all. Well, welcome to the show. I definitely want to start off the show by shouting out all of my new subscribers as usual. Thank you so much for all of you are tuning in and giving feedback. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback on the show, which is great, and we really appreciate y'all for listening. So we'll continue to keep doing this, and make sure you log on to MikeRileyNow.com and follow us on the Facebook, Twitters, Instagrams, all of the social medias, all that cool stuff. So we are a week into President-elect Trump's kind of America, if you will. And needless to say, the based on kind of the consensus that I've been getting around, people still haven't really accepted it, so to speak. I mean, at least in, where we live out here in LA. And there's still been a lot of protests on the streets and a lot of people who are very upset and are not willing to accept what's not necessarily not willing to accept, but are really angry about what took place, especially last week on the show. I said that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she just didn't win it by very much. And I want to publicly take that back right now. She's creasing Donald Trump by almost 2 million votes. So that's a lot. That's a lot to win by in the popular vote. But Donald Trump won by the rules. So, and a lot of people are kind of saying we should, there's this movement going on where they're asking the electors they're trying to petition the electors to not vote for Donald Trump on December 19th when they go to the Electoral College. Have y'all heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, where they're like, oh, you don't have to vote for Donald Trump, but that's not going to happen. And honestly, I went to this thing last night called Drinking Liberally, which is kind of like for those of you who are kind of familiar with it, or if you're not, there's this like kind of social thing that a lot of liberal clubs put together where they get together and they talk about things, and they do like a happy hour or something like that. And it's called Drinking Liberally, and you can find like a local chapter where you live, I'm sure. And I went last night, and a lot of the people that were there were members of, the Democratic Party, and a lot of them work for, local senators or, local politicians or whatnot. And everybody there was kind of looking in a way, we were having a good time, but everybody was still a little puzzled. Everybody was like, what are we going to do? What do we do? What happened? A lot of people are still kind of in that shock factor about what really took place. And it kind of got me thinking. I've been talking to a lot of my Republican friends since the election, trying to explain to them a perspective of how liberals kind of think, and it's so odd, it's so peculiar to me that I didn't realize I was living in such a bubble. Charlie, you talked about this last week. You mentioned this last week when we talked about what happened. Why did Hillary Clinton lose? And you mentioned because there was this backlash that happened.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the Electoral College map, I saw the results, I noticed that there was so much red in the United States, and the little pockets of blue that were there were mostly in just like the major cities, were like the LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, Portland, places like that, New York. And everything else was just it completely read, and it really helped me realize that, 50% of this country really thinks on a completely different planet. They're on a different planet. They think completely differently than the other 50%.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's not mind-boggling, because I feel like it's always kind of been a part of our history. And I know that, and one of the things that I kind of try to get away from is preaching to the choir. Like, I try to be as non-biased as I can, but it ain't no secret. I'm a liberal, shit.
I can't imagine any strong conservatives are watching this.
Yeah. all my strong Fox News viewers are big fans of this show.
They seem to be disappearing as the podcast keeps going on.
Yeah, I know,
for
right?
some strange reason.
We're just not getting those conservatives like we did before. And, I am a Democrat. And I'm not that way because I look at it from a perspective of how, a lot of it has to do with how I was raised or where I was raised at, I suppose. But a lot of it has to do because I personally feel the Democratic Party and their platform is just the most pragmatic one. It's a system that works for everybody, but everybody doesn't think that way. And this is causing this sharp divide in our nation. And it kind of got me thinking, because like I said, I've been talking to my Republican friends. And the minute I start blaming things on Republicans, like if I start to say, well, the Keystone XL pipeline, or if I start to talk about Wall Street and how the economy crashes all the time, or if I start to talk about racism, or if I start to talk about, their immediate answer is, you're just blaming Republicans. And this is why they're pissed off. They're tired of liberals. They can't stand this liberal shit that they have to deal with every day. All of the political correctness that they feel like they have to deal with. All of the, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a homophobe. If you're a white man, or if you're white, that automatically makes you guilty by association. That's the way they've started to feel. And when Barack Obama won both times, it was like rubbing it in their face. And then on top of that, they feel like liberals are some of the most condescending people ever. They have this idea, not necessarily idea, but this viewpoint is, if we disagree with you as liberals, we're going to start to talk you down. We're going to call you stupid. We're going to call you racist. We're going to say you're out of touch. That's why you keep losing. And, they really can't, I don't even know if it's so much, there's a lot of racism in it, and there's a lot of xenophobia in it, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that they just are not in line with liberal principles. They don't like liberals. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is from Arkansas, and she lives here in LA now, but she grew up in like the backwoods of Arkansas, where there's not, it's not. There's
not a blue person in miles.
Miles, yeah, not to be found. And she tells me how these people talk. Not these people. I don't want to say these people. That's not the right. I take that back. I don't mean these people, but she tells me how those people who kind of, right, exactly.
How people there talk.
How people there, how they think, their mentality.
Yeah. Their morals.
Their morals. Their ideas. Why they think the way they think. And I grew up here in LA, or around LA rather, and I've always grew up in a place that was really fast. Lots of people around, lots of different ethnicities, lots of different cultures. But then you go to the South or places along the Rust Belt, and things are just a little bit slower there, right? And she explained to me, people there don't like change. Not that they don't like change, but they don't want to be forced to change. Forced busing. Forcing people to integrate. That's not their idea of the type of change they want. And I have a theory about our two different mindsets in this nation. When this nation started, two mentalities came here from the shores of Europe, right? There was one mentality which was kind of they're kind of called like a northern Bostonian mentality in a sense. Not to say that the North wasn't complicit in slavery or things like that, but it is to say that it was more of a mindset of we're all in this together. And once you've gotten, and government is set up to take care of each other. And once you've gotten to a specific level of economic status, it's now time to allow somebody else to also share in that same dream. And then over time, it evolved into a more egalitarian type of sense, not necessarily always democratic, as far as like Democratic Party, but in the sense of liberal. And then there was another mentality that came here, right? It was the autonomous mentality, the plantation owner mentality.
The agrarian.
Exactly. The serf kind of mentality of a few can have and others can't. I can do with my property whatever I choose to. And even if that property is a person, that's what I can do.
This is mine and mine alone. I will not share.
Exactly. And also too, I got mine the best way I could. You get yours the best way you could.
Every man for himself.
Every man for himself. And this mentality is something that just never died away. During the Civil War, after the Civil War, rather, everybody knows the story of good old Abraham Lincoln. You know, he freed the slaves and fought the Civil War and kept the country together, yada, yada, yada. But nobody ever really talks about his successor, Andrew Johnson. And Andrew Johnson was the only other president in the history of the United States to get impeached other than Bill Clinton. He got saved by one vote from being thrown out of office because the congressman who was supposed to vote for him that day got sick. Andrew Johnson ran on the ticket with Abraham Lincoln because Andrew Johnson, when the South succeeded and decided to start their own country, because they figured we don't think like the Yankees do. We don't think like those liberals. We don't think like them. Back then, Yankee was a liberal.
Democrats were actually on the southern side.
Yeah, the Democrats were the southern ones. Yeah, they were the racist party back then. And they decided to start their own country. When that happened, Andrew Johnson stayed around in the United States Senate. He's the only U.S. senator that stayed there when the rest of them joined the Confederacy. And Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee. Now, Andrew Johnson didn't agree with slavery, but he didn't like black people either.
He was a Union Democrat, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a big fan of the Africans.
Bit controversial.
A lot of controversial. And when Abraham Lincoln was killed and Reconstruction was trying to go on, Andrew Johnson let the South off easy. He forgave all of their crimes, let them loose, and all of the radical Republicans that were in Congress at the time were pissed about that. Why are you letting them off so easy? And I say this to say that within itself means that war, that mentality that stayed from that war never truly died off.
We're seeing it all repeat again and again. You know, it's coming out now. I remember I'm reading my history book, my US history book, and we're on the Civil War right now. And I'm reading these quotes that are talking about riots and raids and how one party was saying that this is not a true representation of what they are, and the other was saying, no, it is. This is their core beliefs. They're showing their true colours. And there were quotes saying from the South, there was a lady that said something along the lines of, I just heard that Abraham Lincoln was elected. Lord help us all. Are we not saying that about Trump right now?
Yes. And it's becoming kind of the same thing. And it's funny you mentioned that, Charlie, because conservatives are having a field day right now with the reaction that the liberals are having to the Donald Trump presidency. We're out in the streets. We're picketing. We're not protesting. I almost said rioting. And God help me if I ever say that word. I don't think anybody's rioting. There are peaceful protests going on. There's a few knuckleheads here and there, but I don't mean rioting. But there's and there's even there's a serious thing going on where there's like this Cal exit movement.
Yeah.
Where, like these people are trying to get this petition signed so California, Oregon, and Washington succeeds and starts its own.
We all know that's not.
No,
really
that is ridiculous. That's literally doing what the conservatives did. We're kind of becoming our enemy. And I don't mean enemy in the sense where conservatives are our enemy, because I don't mean that. I am a true believer and we're all in this together. But I mean just the mentality itself.
We're repeating history and we're on the other side now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the question is what do we do? Is it changing the mindset of conservatives or changing the mindset of people who don't think the way we do? Is it cooperating with them and finding some level of common ground and coexisting and living together? Or is it that we as liberals have to figure out a different way to take our government back? Because I personally think that particular mentality, that mentality that came here, that's been here this whole time, is just evolved into a different way.
And now it has the power.
Right. All right, y'all. We'll be right back. This is the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. All right, y'all, and welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast. I'm your host, Mike Riley, of course. I'm here with Cameron Robson and Charlie Sandy. Hello, hello. And this is our second segment, which is our news of the week. So we'll try to go through this. A lot of it's kind of relevant to what's going on. I know I always try to give good news, or news that doesn't have to do with like not politics, but like politically stuff. But sometimes we just kind of dip into that, so we'll see what happens. But
sorry, I love that phrase, politically stuff.
Politically stuff. Yeah, that type of stuff.
We'll get there eventually.
We'll get there. Yeah, I'm coming up with my word. The first story I have comes from the New York Times. It says, how exercise might keep depression at bay. Exercise may be an effective treatment for depression. It might even help prevent us from becoming depressed in the first place, according to 3 timely new studies. The studies pool outcomes from past research involving more than 1 million men and women, and taken together strongly suggest that regular exercise alters our bodies and brains in ways that makes us resistant to despair. Don't know about that one. I disagree. How about y'all?
Well, I see the science side of it, that exercise gives you endorphins, and endorphins are supposed to boost your mentality and make you, I guess, feel happier.
Yeah. It helps.
I certainly know there are times I feel it helps with stress, and I guess stress can be a leading cause of depression.
Sure,
so I see it as a chain reaction. Cameron and I both obviously have a lot of stress with school.
Yeah.
Y'all have no idea. Wait till you have to pay bills.
And I think that we both feel oftentimes that you just want to scream, or you just want to go and run and kind of thing. And I think that running can actually get treated as an escape almost to everything, which could help if everything's piling on you and you feel depressed in that sense. But I don't think it can cure all depression.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it definitely has to do with it, and a lot of the concept is like, if you do have depression, it's then the act of getting out and exercising is incredibly difficult for a lot of people because
Don't want to leave the house.
Yeah, because some people don't. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest here. Like, I have had depression before.
Sure, we all have.
Yeah, and it's like a debilitating way, and like you just don't feel like you can get out of the house at all, and so like the exercise, it makes sense. It's almost more of like a preemptive, as to do it before it even comes into play.
Right.
Because it'd definitely be very difficult, at least I know for many people, to get out and then do the exercise when you're feeling so incredibly helpless.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, and I think that it definitely helps. I know when I was going through my depression, and I went through a pretty severe one, just getting out and running around and doing stuff like that, exercising. I was really into kickboxing and mixed martial arts, and that really helped out a lot. But I've always been a very active person, and I worked out before that, and I don't think it made me resistant to despair whatsoever. So, but exercise is obviously good for you both physically and mentally. So you should exercise regardless if you're trying to kick depression or not. Yeah. That's my thing. All right, this next story comes from the science section of the Business Insider. Stephen Hawking, who many of you, I'm sure everybody knows who Stephen Hawking is. He's like the supposedly smartest man in the world. Yeah, states that humans have only about 1,000 years left. Stephen Hawking thinks our days are numbered unless we find a new planet to live on. During a talk at the Oxford Union Debating Society this week, the renowned theoretical physicist said humanity probably had only about 1,000 years left before going extinct. Damn. Our only hope of escaping these dangers, Hawking says, is by finding another habitable planet. Wow. This is probably due to climate change, something our new president-elect, I'm so happy he believes in, and he wants to do something about. That makes me feel so reassured.
So happy.
Man,
I feel so safe in his tiny
we are both
hands.
currently enrolled in a class that is not technically looked at as a real class by our president.
Yeah, we're both
which is definitely a little interesting. It's like, do I really have to go to this class anymore?
Yeah,
like,
we can argue that
States' rights.
AP
Thank God,
environment is no
California.
longer relevant.
We're laughing about this for some reason.
It's laughing or crying, okay? Which do you want us to do?
One or the other. That's so real. You ever seen that movie Interstellar?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of think that's kind of going to be the future of our planet here pretty soon. It's going to be a thing. I'll tell you what, a broken clock is right at least twice a day.
Exactly.
And Ronald Reagan once said something in one of his State of the Union addresses that really resonated with me. He said that, and this was during the time of like sci-fi and stuff like that, when that was a big deal. He said that, I wonder what it'll take to bring the world together. Maybe it'll take some sort of outside force coming here and threatening our planet as a whole for us to realize that we have our common enemies make the best allies. And for me, I don't think that's going to be some sort of alien spaceship. I think it's going to be climate change. I think climate change is going to be that one
100%.
thing that's going to have to force us to come together and face a global catastrophe because it's going to affect us all.
Yeah, it's definitely just getting people to be convinced that it's real.
Right. That's a big
I think
problem.
that's just the big hunch, because I think that if everyone believed in it, like, we'd be so much further ahead.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
agree.
like we keep putting people in power that just don't believe in it or refuse to believe in it because it gives their companies or them some sort of advantage. It's just like,
yeah, and I
know
think
what to do with you.
I think this is the first time in human history where there's been a conflict that cannot be solved unless every single country on this earth gets involved.
That is true.
And
I agree.
I think it's the first global concern that needs a global solution. It's one that, just not a few powerful countries can decide to pitch in and help. It's something that every single person, every single body, every single country on this planet needs to realize and needs to do something. Otherwise, we're no longer going to have a planet to fight about.
Wow. Very 100%. Well said. Very well said. Absolutely. Or we're going to have to start looking for another one. And I don't know how that's going to work.
Oh, goody.
Man, all right. This next story comes from USA Today, from Josh Hafner, and it was published today. The Surgeon General of the United States says 1 in 7 in the USA will face substance addiction. A federal report released Thursday calls for a shift in the way America addresses substance addictions, finding 1 in 7 Americans will face such disorders. Only 10% of those addicted will receive treatment, the study said. An American dies every 19 minutes from opioid or heroin overdose, and Thursday's report spells out the cost of substance abuse. The economic impact of drug and alcohol misuse and addiction amounts to $442 billion each year, topping diabetes at $245 billion, said Vivek Murthy, who is our Surgeon General. And it's and just to kind of follow up on that, there was another story on Vice that said that one of the biggest addictions that's coming around is screen addiction. A new book on August 9th that was released August 9th called Glow Kids, How Screen Addiction is Hijacking Our Kids by Dr. Nicholas Cardias. I'm probably butchering your name. He's one of the top addiction experts, details how compulsive technology usage and reliance on screens can neurologically damage the developing brain of a child the same way that drug addiction can. Now, addiction, it's funny because I don't think drugs are the only thing people can be addicted to. You can be addicted to a whole lot of crap. You can be addicted to success. You can be addicted to money. You can be addicted to your phone. You can be addicted to sex. You can be addicted to Facebook. All kinds of different stuff,
My mum has the last one.
Right.
Addicted to food. Just
addicted
like
to
anything.
food.
Yeah, addicted to food. I got the Instagram problem. I'll get off my phone and then I'll just 2 minutes later I'm just jumping back on it looking. I was just on Instagram a second ago. Like I didn't miss nothing.
Yeah. It's like you have this constant fear of missing out, which is, I think is a lot of the main core of an addiction to some sort of social media.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we've begun to mainstream this sort of addiction thing. You have now, being addicted to watching a TV show on hours on end.
Cool.
It's binge watching now. Oh my God, I just binge watched this entire series.
It's made a cool thing.
It's like the thing to do now. It's like it's okay to be addicted to certain things now. And, drug addiction and just addiction in general, I think just really stems from a psychological condition of wanting to escape. And if we're having such a high level of addiction, America's number 1 in drug addiction, just like we're number 1 in people who have to go see psychologists. We're number 1 in divorce. Mm-hmm. We're number 1 and, teen pregnant, all that
We're
bad.
number one.
Yeah,
we're number one.
Not the right number one.
Not the right number one. And that's not to badmouth the United States of America, but it just kind of goes to show you if we have this high level of addiction that's going on, and addiction's not something we really treat as a health condition. We treat it as like a criminal condition, right? We talked about this last week when it came to the war on drugs. And it really says a lot about the overall just level of, I guess happiness would be the right word of our society. I mean, why is it that we have such a high addiction rate?
What's so wrong in our society that we feel that so many people need an escape?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. It's something that we should be researching and looking into, and not treating addiction as some sort of like crime, which is something I'm kind of fearful for in the future. Anyway, all right, y'all, we'll be right back. We're going to wrap this up in our third segment. This is the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com. That's right. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Soon, I know I say this every week, but very soon, coming soon, we'll be live. And we'll be also doing this on Facebook Live and on Periscope and stuff like that. So that way you can see all the crap that we're laughing at off air. Because
there's a lot.
Yeah. Me, Cam, and Charlie, we get mad silly
over
in
my
here.
face, so I still
yeah, exactly.
You'll
anonymous person.
I'm gonna wear a wig. Yeah, it's gonna be nice. It's gonna be like a Rick James wig.
Aren't you wearing one now?
I am. I'm wearing. No, this is a toupee.
Buy like a purple wig. I think that's your color.
Yeah,
I think
it'll totally bring out my eyes.
think
Absolutely,
so.
absolutely.
We're getting so sidetracked.
Right. This is ADD at its best, y'all. But make sure you log on to MikeRileyNow.com. Follow us on all this social media stuff. So I kind of want to, instead of going into economics today, I definitely want to piggyback off what we were talking about in the first segment, and continue to kind of talk about this divide that's in the nation, and what are we going to do to come together? Now, I mentioned earlier in the show that the reason I am a Democrat, and the reason why I consider myself a Democrat is because, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the Democratic Party, the platform is e pluribus unum. Out of one, there is many. We're all in this together. I really believe in that. It's something that I take on even to the level of spirituality. Like, I really believe we're all in this together, and we all need each other to help each other out. Not even from a moral standpoint, but just from a mathematical standpoint. To me, that's what makes the most sense. However, the fabric of this nation has never necessarily lived within that. Has not necessarily lived by that motto of we're all in this together. There's always been some sort of divide amongst us, and that's still taking place right now. And what do we do about it? What's going to be the thing? I mean, we can't, there's no splitting off and making different countries here. There's no, we accept the outcome of the election. And we have our disagreements, and that's fine.
As much as we try not to accept it.
Right.
Close your eyes and pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, we have our disagreements as Democrats and Republicans and whatever else you may be out there. But are we really a United States?
No.
I mean, we're not, as I talked about this earlier during our break, we're not one nation under God. We're one nation divided by a common goal, and that is to rule the government how we see fit.
Right.
And unfortunately, how one side sees ruling the government fit, the other side might see as tyrannical, or the other side might see as completely unhinged or just morally wrong.
Pointing fingers game.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
He said this, so I'm going to say this back, and this makes this acceptable because this happened. It's like,
he hurt me, but I overreacted.
Yeah.
We're fighting like bickering siblings, and we need to grow up as a country. It's been, over 200 years now. I think it's time.
But how do you do that? I mean, how do you grow up? I don't know how to. And don't get me wrong, I don't offend my conservative friends whatsoever. I mean, it doesn't get to the point where we're like throwing fists or anything like that. But It's always it always ends with a beer and a laugh, which is good.
Or everyone goes to their separate corners.
But everybody goes to their separate corners. Yeah, I'm gonna play with my friends over
breath.
here, right? And you play with your friends over there, type of thing. But I don't really know how to effectively talk my viewpoints to conservatives or to anybody else, even liberals, because there's a lot of liberals out there who are kind of who got under my skin too. Like a lot of the ones who are out there protesting right now, a lot of them didn't vote. We talked about this last week. Some of them didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and some of them didn't vote at all.
Like we said last week, it's like if you didn't vote and you didn't try and change something, you don't have a right to complain.
But they do have a right to complain, and they do.
I mean, they do, but it's like
in my own mind, they shouldn't have a right to complain.
Yeah, it's just like they didn't try and change things at all, and it's incredibly irritating because then they go out and they're like, oh, look at these awful people, like they're trying to send the United States into like a burning flame of cinders or whatever, and it's just like I don't know, it's incredibly irritating.
It is.
They don't look at it from any other viewpoints. It's just like...
So, Cameron, what you just said right now, they don't see it because everything's perspective, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't look at it from that particular viewpoint, what do we do to change that? And that's the question I'm asking. That's like the $1 million question right there. It really is.
Which I think nobody really knows.
Because how do we come together as a nation? I'll tell you what. You can't legislate morality, right? That's an old saying. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people have to come along and like, for example, homosexuality and gay marriage. 20 years ago, it was still extremely unacceptable. Yeah. Now it's not so unacceptable. Yeah, you even hear conservatives say they should have the right to get married and everything else. To 50 years ago, interracial marriages were against the law in places like Mississippi. You couldn't get married if you were black. A black person and a white person couldn't marry each other. Mm-hmm. And we've come a long way. So these things happen. The change comes along, but what ushers in that change? What gives people that sense of understanding? And that goes on both sides, not just for conservatives, but that goes for liberals too. So what do we do to come together as a nation? Where's the common ground that we can find amongst our division? And it's hard to do. It's a difficult thing to do. From an economic standpoint, for me, at least that's the hardest part, because when I argue with my conservative friends about economics, they just their reply is, well, certain things people have to just get on their own, like healthcare. I don't personally understand that. I don't understand why healthcare should be a privilege and not a right, why some people should get healthcare and others shouldn't. And usually the conservative fight back to that is, well, I don't want to pay for it. Why should I have to pay taxes, and why should my money have to go to somebody who's too lazy to get up and do it on their own, or who doesn't want to make smart health decisions? If a person who smokes all the time or eats really bad or something along those lines, why should I have to pay for him to get health care? I take care of myself. Or when we talk about things along racial lines, I've talked to, not white supremacists before. I mean, I have, and it's one of these things where when I usually tell a lot of my black friends who always kind of generalize white people as being, oh, white folks are this way or white folks are that way. And I try to correct them, like, no, it ain't white people. White people ain't got nothing to do with this. It's not white people. It's white supremacists, white imperialists, people who believe that because I'm white, on some level, I'm superior to you. Yeah. Whether that means in intellect, whether that means socially, economically, beauty, anything that goes along those lines, I'm superior to you in some way. And a lot of, especially white conservatives, just believe that. And how do you talk to them without talking? And they'll use the Lee Atwater Southern strategy kind of rhetoric when explaining their views on racism. Well, black people are not black people, but they'll say they don't say black people to my face. But when I talk to my other friends, they usually say that they refer to them as the blacks are just lazy. They're just criminals. They're naturally just kind of ghetto or dumb or poor. They demonize poor people. So, and they try to use that as a logistical argument.
Which it's not. Like, I just am. A lot of my problem with, I don't necessarily have a problem with Republicans.
No.
They can have their own opinion, and that's totally fine. But the problem is that they don't, a lot of the times people decide to ignore like a normal human right of being just fair to each other and like understanding opinions.
Being fair to each other is they look at it like it's fair now.
Yeah.
There is no racism anymore. There is no discrimination. You have the right to get up and pursue and do things just like I do. Why do you have to rub it in my face as a liberal?
Yeah.
And I get that. It's just understanding that there's just basic human rights of being just treated fairly.
But just to play the devil's advocate with you real quick, Cam, if I heard that, and I listen to conservatives, like I actually watch Fox News and listen to Rush Limbaugh and shit like that.
Yeah.
I know it's the devil's poison, but I'd want to hear what their viewpoints are. I'm curious to know what makes them think that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love hearing exactly how their brain works and like the reasoning behind it, and I love to know why they choose this way. And I personally, if I'm having a conversation with them, I would rather just sit and listen as opposed to try and change their viewpoint so that they feel heard.
But it's hard, though, isn't it?
That
there's definitely a point where you're like,
because it gets emotional.
But I think the thing is that is a rarity in our country here, because I think we don't try to understand so much as we try to convert. And that goes to the point where everything that we're saying will fall onto deaf ears, because what you're doing is not trying to take in what the other person is saying. You're trying to think, what's my rebuttal? What am I going to say against that? What am I going to do to defend my beliefs? And it comes on both sides. And I think that we will never be able to come to a compromise if we can't listen, and if we can't get aside our own pride and our own arrogance at our own correctness, and try to see the side's perspective rather than just think about what you're going to say next.
But from a human being standpoint, if I'm talking to somebody and they have a disagreement with me, especially
you're going to want to fight back.
It's hard not to just
you see red
immediately be like, what? If I'm talking to some, I'm talking to my conservative friends and they're telling me, well, Mike, I just believe that, the government needs to be out of business. Why are they regulating everything? They're destroying business. And Republicans and libertarians and people like that, they do have specific examples. They'll point to something. They'll give you something that'll shift the entire game. They'll point to a specific example. Like, they'll say something along the lines of, especially, I love it when it comes to crime and when it comes to like those statistics. They'll say stuff like, well, black people commit the most crime. They're the ones who kill each other the most. They're the ones who sell the most drugs. And they'll throw that stuff out there, and it's just like, okay.
They're the ones that are caught because they're actively looked for, because our government actively looks for that.
Right. There's a whole different pedigree to that, certainly. But at the same time, when they throw those statistics out there, and when they throw stuff like that there, it's hard not to get back into the heated conversation and want to say something like you're racist, you're a xenophobe, you're a homophobe, you're something along those lines, and it shuts them down immediately. And that's not us coming together. That's not we're all in this together. That becomes, us against them. And that's not, there's no way in hell we're going to have a United States of America if that's the way it continues to be. And I really don't know how else to address it other than, I'm a person where, like I said, I'm a liberal. Yeah, I'm a Democrat, but I like to call a spade a spade. I'm going to call things for what it is. And I'd like to think I do that from a rational standpoint. But, that's why I have this podcast, because if I'm not, you're more than welcome to, go on MikeRileyNow.com and drop me an email and tell me I'm full of shit. I would love to hear it. But at the same time, I really try to give it to people from a very rational standpoint. And that's hard to do sometimes from the other side because of their idea of rationale. Like I said, everything's perspective here. So coming together as a nation is a difficult conversation that we're going to have to try to have at some point. And we're trying. I mean, you see tons of Democrats coming out, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and, Barney Frank and Keith Ellison, they're all coming out and saying, we'll work with you, Donald Trump, if you got the right plan. Which kind of scares me because he's kind of taking some Democratic policies, right? He's going to have this $1 trillion infrastructure investment, which he's going to sell he's going to do this private public thing where he's going to take all of our infrastructure projects and sell them off either as treasury bonds or sell them off as something else and give tax credits to big corporations who invest in our infrastructure. And they're going to make money off the toll roads and all kinds of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it'll give some people some jobs, and Democrats might go along with it, and blah, 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 which is whatever. I mean, there's been so many people out there who are saying the way to defeat Donald Trump is the same way they try to defeat Barack Obama, which is by obstructing everything he does. There's the caucus room conspiracy, where Republicans just said no to everything, including Barack Obama's infrastructure spending bill, where he wanted to invest $1 trillion in infrastructure, and they said no. Now they're going to be like, sure, Donald Trump, anything. But
we'll have a way to kind of call them out on it if they say yes.
Oh, but that's the thing. We tried to call the Republicans out on it, and it got no media coverage.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. No, we tried to call bloody murder on the obstruction, and nobody gave a damn. Nobody cared. Mm-hmm. It's something that goes over everybody's heads. But anyway, back to what I was back to our unity speech here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know the answer to this question as far as not necessarily how do we get people to our side, because that's not what I'm trying to do.
No, it's unifying. It's finding a middle.
It's finding a middle ground. But it's, in some conservative viewpoints, I agree with. Like, I agree with the political correctness. I think it's a little over the top, especially for liberals. I agree with personal responsibility, but at the same time, you got to give people the tools necessary for them to be responsible.
Yeah, and I definitely think that something that needs to change is our education system, and I think that we learn about our government, we learn about our history, but I think that something that should be taught as important and side by side with government is civil rights and civil decency and human decency, because how are you going to get a government that treats humans like humans if you're not taught alongside what your government stands for and how you run government? If you're not taught human rights side by side, then you're never going to see them as synonymous things. You're never going to see a government that protects human rights if you don't compare government to human rights.
Right. And then there's this whole the government is the boogeyman thing too. I mean, this was something that was ushered in during the Reagan era, and it still holds true to this day, where government is the enemy and government is not the solution, it's the problem, right? The 5 most dangerous words are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, or something, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is something we definitely got to have a conversation about, but we'll talk about that. Well, anyway, everybody, have a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless Charlie. God bless Cameron. God bless Book. And God bless my man Alan over there. And God bless all of you too. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. And please remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to go out there. You got to get involved. And despite what you think, we are all in this together. All right, y'all. Cheers. Happy Thanksgiving. You are listening to the Mike Riley Now podcast on the Young Angels of America Network. Follow us by visiting MikeRileyNow.com.